Drift into the Timeless Tales Library, where stories become bridges to tranquil slumber. I'm Oliver, ready to guide you through tonight's gentle narrative one, designed to calm your restless thoughts and usher you softly into peaceful dreams. The Timeless Tales Library thrives through the kindness of listeners like you. If these stories have offered you refuge, please subscribe and help us continue crafting these serene escapes. As you find your comfortable position, drop a comment below sharing where in the world you're joining us tonight, and tell me a destination where you'd love a story to transport you. Maybe the lavender fields of Provence, a moonlit beach in Santorini, the ancient temples of Angkor Wat, or beneath the aurora borealis in Norway. Your dream destinations kindle the inspiration for our growing collection of tales. This story is about a storm-swept Christmas evening at the Rainy Day Storybook Bakery, where warmth glows from frost-touched windows and the scent of cinnamon and fresh bread fills the air. As snow turns to rain and back again, familiar souls from beloved tales find their way through the winter night to a place of shelter, sweetness, and unexpected companionship, a magical refuge where every visitor discovers exactly the comfort they've been seeking. Now, close your eyes and take a long, quiet breath. Tonight, your journey leads to the Lantern Hall in the Timeless Tales Library. Lanterns hover above every shelf, glowing with warm, colorful light. Each lantern illuminates a story, and the reflection of their glow shimmers across polished wood floors. The gentle scent of parchment and wax fills the air, soft and comforting. Sink into your bed, your cozy corner in this luminous hall. Release your hands, your shoulders, your toes. Let the gentle sway of the lantern's glow lull your body and mind into stillness. Follow the path of light along the shelves. Let each lantern's story drift into your imagination, carrying you softly into the calm of night. The Coziest Rainy Storybook Bakery, a Christmas bedtime story for adults. The Rainy Day Storybook Bakery stood on the corner of Cobblestone Lane and Whisper Street, its windows glowing like amber jewels against the darkening winter evening. Outside, the weather couldn't quite decide what it wanted to be. Snow had fallen throughout the afternoon, blanketing the neighborhood in soft white silence. But now, as twilight deepened into night, the temperature had shifted just enough to turn the snow to rain. It fell in gentle sheets, pattering against the bakery's mullioned windows, washing the accumulated snow from the steep gabled roof and sending tiny rivers trickling along the gutters. Inside, the bakery was everything the storm was not. Warm, steady, glowing with golden light and the indescribable comfort of fresh baking. The space stretched deeper than seemed possible from the outside, with exposed wooden beams crossing the ceiling and walls painted the color of fresh cream. Strings of tiny white lights draped between the beams, not blinking or flashing, but holding their soft glow constant as stars. In the corner, a fireplace crackled with a steady, mesmerizing flame, and before it sat two deep armchairs upholstered in burgundy velvet, with a small round table between them. The glass display cases ran along one wall, lit from within so that every pastry, every loaf, every delicate confection seemed to glow with its own inner light. Tonight, the cases were filled with Christmas specialties, stolen dusted with powdered sugar, their centers rich with marzipan and dried fruits. Gingerbread houses far too beautiful to eat, though their scent perfumed the air with molasses and spice. Cinnamon stars with edges so perfect they might have been cut by elves, and deep dish mince pies that released ribbons of steam when broken open. Behind the counter, deeper in the bakery where the ovens hummed with steady warmth, the baker worked quietly. You rarely saw the baker clearly, just glimpses of floury hands, the corner of an apron, the swift, efficient movements of someone who knew their craft so well it had become a kind of magic. The baker seemed to know always what was needed, what each visitor hungered for, and it was never quite as simple as bread or cake. The bell above the door chimed softly, a gentle, musical sound that blended with the rain, and the first visitor of the evening stepped inside. She was a woman in her late 20s, with honey-colored hair pinned up beneath a wool scarf that sparkled with raindrops. She wore a forest green coat that came to her knees, and as she unwound her scarf and shook it gently, she breathed in deeply, closing her eyes for just a moment. When she opened them, they were bright with something like recognition, or perhaps relief. "Good evening," she said softly. To the baker or the bakery itself, it wasn't quite clear which. What a night to be out. But I saw your lights from down the street, and She trailed off, smiling. Well, I followed my nose, I suppose. She approached the counter slowly, unbuttoning her coat to reveal a simple wool dress the color of nutmeg. Her eyes traveled over the displays, taking in each item with the careful attention of someone who understood good baking, who knew what went into creating these things. "You're Gretel," the baker's voice came from the back, warm and knowing. It wasn't a question. The woman Gretel laughed softly. "I am. Does it show so clearly, even after all these years? You look at the pastries," the baker said, moving into view just enough to slide a cup of something steaming onto the counter. The way someone looks at old friends, or old memories. Gretel wrapped her hands around the cup, mulled cider, fragrant with cinnamon and cloves, and breathed in the steam. "I suppose I do. My brother and we run a bakery now. Did you know? In the village where we grew up. Full circle, in a way." She took a sip, closing her eyes. "But sometimes I still need to visit other bakeries, to remember that they can be places of warmth, of safety. Not all forests are dark," the baker said gently, "and not all ovens are meant for harm." "No," Gretel agreed, settling onto one of the tall stools near the counter. "No, they're not. Most are meant for this." She gestured with her cup at the cases full of beautiful things, at the warm room, at the gentle sound of rain, for creating comfort, for feeding people, body and soul. The baker placed a small plate on the counter, 3 perfect Lebkuchen, the traditional German spice cookies glazed with chocolate on one side. Gretel's eyes misted slightly. "Thank you," she whispered. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, letting the spices, cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, cardamom, roll across her tongue. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming harder against the windows, and Gretel drew her shawl closer around her shoulders, grateful beyond measure to be exactly where she was. The door chimed again. This time, a tall young man entered, shaking rain from a heavy oilskin coat. He had the weathered look of someone who'd spent considerable time at sea, tanned skin, dark hair curling from the dampness, and sharp eyes that took in the whole room in an instant, cataloguing exits and occupants with unconscious efficiency. He was handsome in a rough sort of way, with strong hands and the easy, balanced stride of someone accustomed to rolling decks. "Evening," he said, his accent marking him as English, though with the slight lilt of someone who'd spent time in the Caribbean. He hung his coat on the rack by the door, revealing a simple linen shirt and wool vest. "Miserable night out there. Saw your light and hoped you might still be open." "Always," the baker said simply. "Welcome, Jim." The young man, Jim Hawkins, now nearly 30, and captain of his own merchant vessel, grinned. "Word travels fast. Or do you just know everyone who walks through that door?" "Something like that," the baker replied, already preparing something at the back counter. Jim noticed Gretel and nodded politely. "Ma'am, hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," Gretel said warmly. "There's room for everyone here, I think. That's the nature of the place." Jim pulled up a stool, leaving one between himself and Gretel close enough for companionship, far enough for privacy. "I've been at sea for 3 months," he said to no one in particular, or perhaps to both of them. "Made port 2 days ago. The ship needs repairs before we head back out after the new year, so I find myself with rare time on my hands. And do you know what I wanted more than anything?" "What's that?" Gretel asked gently. "Something that tastes like home," Jim said simply. "Not the grand meals you get at fancy establishments, but the kind of simple, honest food that reminds you what you're sailing home for in the first place." The baker placed before him a deep bowl of bread pudding, still warm from the oven, rich with cream and studded with rum-soaked raisins. Beside it, a small pitcher of vanilla custard and a mug of dark coffee that smelled of distant mountains and careful roasting. Jim stared at the bowl for a long moment. "My mother used to make this," he said quietly, "before everything changed, before treasure islands and adventure and all of it." He picked up the spoon. "Sometimes I miss the version of myself that had never left home. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Gretel said. "Adventure changes us. Sometimes we're grateful for it, and sometimes we miss the simpler people we used to be." Jim took a bite of the pudding and closed his eyes, and for just a moment he looked not like a seasoned ship's captain, but like the teenage boy he'd been, working at the Admiral Benbow Inn, dreaming of the sea without quite understanding what those dreams would cost. They sat in companionable silence for a while, Gretel with her Lebkuchen, Jim with his bread pudding, while the rain continued its gentle percussion against the windows, and the fire crackled softly in its stone hearth. The door chimed a third time. The woman who entered seemed to bring a shift in the very air, something exotic and mysterious, though she moved with quiet grace and wore relatively simple traveling clothes. She was perhaps in her early 30s, with dark hair elaborately braided and coiled, dark eyes that held entire worlds of stories, and skin the color of desert sand at sunset. She carried herself with the poise of royalty, though her clothes were those of a traveler, a long wool coat over layers of skirts, a scarf embroidered with golden thread. "Forgive me," she said, her voice melodious, accented, mesmerizing in its cadence. "I am traveling through and saw your lights. The storm caught me unprepared, and I wondered if you might have—" "Tea," the baker said, already setting a copper pot to boil, "and something sweet. Please, sit. You're most welcome." The woman's face broke into a smile of such warmth that the whole bakery seemed to brighten. "Thank you. I am called Scheherazade." Gretel straightened with interest. "The Scheherazade? The storyteller?" "One and the same," Scheherazade said, settling gracefully onto a stool. "Though those days are long behind me, my husband and I have been married now for many years. The storytelling was—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Necessary. Once. Now it's simply what I love to do." "You're traveling alone?" Jim asked, something protective in his voice. "My husband is visiting family in the north," Scheherazade explained. "I'm on my way to meet him, but I wanted to stop and collect more stories. That's what I do now. I travel and gather tales from different places, different people. Every bakery, every inn, every village, square has its stories." She looked around the Rainy Day Storybook Bakery with evident appreciation. "And this place? Oh, this place has stories in its very walls, doesn't it?" The baker placed before her a delicate glass cup of golden tea, fragrant with cardamom and rose, and beside it a small selection of pastries. Baklava dripping with honey and pistachios, marmoul filled with dates and dusted with powdered sugar, and something that looked like a cross between a French palmier and a Persian rose cake. Scheherazade lifted the tea to her lips and sighed with deep contentment. "Perfect, exactly perfect." "I've always wondered," Gretel said hesitantly, "if you don't mind my asking, after everything you went through, all those nights of storytelling, did you ever tire of stories? Did they ever become a burden?" Scheherazade considered this, sipping her tea thoughtfully. "There were moments," she admitted, "when stories felt like chains, when I resented the need for them. But then I realized stories saved my life. Yes, but more than that, they connected me to every person who had ever lived. Every joy, every sorrow, every adventure and quiet moment, they're all preserved in stories. How could I resent something so powerful? Like bread," the baker said quietly from the back, "made daily out of necessity, but also made with love, transformed into something that nourishes more than just the body." "Exactly so," Scheherazade said, selecting a piece of baklava. "The making of a thing with care transforms both the thing and the maker." Jim nodded slowly. On the sea we tell stories too, long watches, longer voyages, the same tales over and over, ghost ships, mermaids, lost treasures. But every telling is different. Every storyteller adds something of themselves, and every listener receives something unique. Scheherazade added, the same story, heard at different moments of your life, becomes a different story entirely. The three of them fell into an easy conversation, sharing their own tales. Gretel spoke of the bakery she ran with her brother, of the children who came in wide-eyed to buy their first cookies with coins saved in jars. Jim told of a pod of dolphins that had raced his ship for 3 hours straight, leaping and playing in the bow wave like pure joy given form. Scheherazade described a village she'd visited, where every building was painted a different shade of blue, and how the whole place seemed to shimmer like a mirage. The door chimed again, so softly it was almost lost in the sound of rain. The young woman who entered was small and slight, with pale blonde hair and eyes the color of winter ice. She wore a coat that had seen better days, though it was clean and carefully mended, and she carried herself with the careful dignity of someone who had known poverty but refused to be defined by it. She couldn't have been more than 25, but her eyes held an ancient weariness. She stood just inside the door, dripping, uncertain. "Please," the baker said, voice infinitely gentle. "Come in, you're safe here." The young woman, Karen, though she rarely used the name people had once called her, the little match girl, took a tentative step forward. "I can't. I don't have much money, but it's so cold outside, and I thought perhaps I could just warm myself for a moment." "No payment needed," the baker said firmly. "Not tonight, not here. Come, sit by the fire." Gretel immediately rose and guided the young woman to one of the deep armchairs by the fireplace, settling her in gently. "Here, let me take your coat. You're soaked through." Karen allowed herself to be fussed over, clearly unused to kindness but desperately in need of it. Jim brought over one of the thick wool blankets that had been draped over the back of the second chair, tucking it around her shoulders. Scheherazade poured fresh tea from her own pot into a new cup and pressed it into Karen's cold hands. "Drink," she urged gently. "Let the warmth work its way in." The baker appeared with a tray, a bowl of rich, creamy soup potato and leek, with chunks of good bread on the side, and a small plate of butter cookies shaped like stars. Simple food, but made with such care that it seemed to glow. Karen stared at the tray, then up at the faces around her: Gretel, Jim, Scheherazade, and the baker's retreating form, and her eyes filled with tears. "I used to stand outside places like this," she whispered, "watching through windows, smelling the food and warmth, but never, never inside. Always outside, in the cold." "Not tonight," Gretel said firmly, kneeling beside the chair. "Tonight you're inside. Tonight you're warm, and no one is going to send you back out into that storm." Karen ate slowly, reverently, as though each spoonful of soup was a prayer of thanksgiving. The others returned to their seats, giving her space but maintaining their comforting presence. The fire crackled. The rain drummed. The bakery held them all in its gentle, unwavering warmth. After a while, when Karen had finished eating and some color had returned to her cheeks, she spoke again. "I work now," she said quietly, "at a children's home, taking care of orphans, making sure they have warm beds and full bellies, making sure no child has to stand outside in the cold, trying to keep warm with matches." Her voice was fierce with determination. "I survived that night for a reason, and now I know what that reason was." "The best stories," Scheherazade said softly, "are the ones where we transform our pain into purpose." Karen smiled, a small, genuine expression that lit her whole face. "Yes, yes, exactly that." The door chimed once more, and the snow, which had turned to rain hours ago, was turning back to snow-soft, lazy flakes that drifted past the windows like feathers from some celestial pillow. The man who entered was middle-aged and distinguished, with grey threading through his dark hair, and clothes that marked him as someone of means, not ostentatious wealth, but solid, respectable prosperity. He had kind eyes and work-worn hands that spoke of someone who had built his success rather than inherited it. "Mr. Pirrup," the baker called warmly. "It's been too long." The man Pip, who had journeyed from blacksmith's apprentice to gentleman and finally to something wiser than either, smiled broadly. "I was visiting relatives in the city and couldn't pass by without stopping in. Your bakery appears in my dreams sometimes, you know. I'm always trying to find it, and when I finally do, I wake up. So when I saw your lights tonight, I thought this time I'm actually awake, I'd better not miss my chance." He shook the snow from his coat and moved into the warm space with the ease of someone who had finally learned to be comfortable in his own skin. "Good evening, everyone. Don't let me interrupt, I'm just here for whatever the baker recommends and the pleasure of being somewhere that feels like home." Jim gestured to an empty stool at the counter. "Plenty of room, though I warn you, the conversation has been exceptional. You'll have to contribute." "I'll do my best," Pip said amiably, settling in. "Though these days I find I'm more interested in listening than talking. In my youth, I was so busy trying to be someone I thought I should be that I rarely stopped to appreciate the people I was actually with." The baker placed before him a slice of Christmas cake, the traditional English kind, dark with fruits and rich with brandy, topped with marzipan and royal icing. Beside it, a small glass of port. Pip took a bite and closed his eyes. Oh, that takes me back. My sister used to make a cake like this every Christmas. I was too young and foolish to appreciate it properly then." He took another bite, savoring it. "Isn't it strange how we spend our youth racing toward the future, and our maturity wishing we could tell our younger selves to slow down and pay attention?" "Not strange at all," Karen said quietly from her chair by the fire. "I think it's the most human thing there is. We learn by living. We can't skip to wisdom, we have to walk the whole path. Even the dark parts," Gretel added, "especially the dark parts maybe, they teach us to appreciate the light. And the storms teach us to be grateful for shelter, Jim said, raising his coffee cup in a small toast. Here's to warm bakeries on cold nights. They all raised their cups and glasses in agreement, a small ceremony of gratitude. The door chimed one final time. The young woman who entered was perhaps 27 or 28, dressed in a practical traveling suit in shades of burgundy and cream. She had brown hair pinned up sensibly, a face that was pretty in an understated way, and an air of capable competence. But her eyes held something else, a hint of wildness, of distant islands and eternal youth, tempered now by the wisdom of someone who had chosen to grow up. "Wendy," the baker said, and there was particular warmth in the greeting. "Welcome back." Wendy Darling smiled, a complex expression that held both joy and something like melancholy. "I'm in town for the holidays, visiting my brothers. John is a banker now, very serious. Michael is at university, studying literature. He wants to write adventure novels. Can you imagine?" Her smile widened. "I suppose he comes by it honestly." She moved to the counter, and the others made room for her naturally, as though she'd always been part of their company. "I used to think," Wendy said, accepting a cup of hot chocolate topped with real whipped cream and a dusting of cinnamon, "that growing up was the worst thing that could happen to a person, that being an adult meant losing all the magic." "And now?" Scheherazade asked with interest. "Now I know that growing up doesn't mean losing magic, it means learning to create your own." Wendy took a sip of the chocolate, leaving a small foam moustache that she wiped away with an embroidered handkerchief. "I'm a teacher now. I teach literature and creative writing to children, and every day I get to watch them discover the magic of stories, of imagination. I get to help them learn to fly with words instead of pixie dust." "That's beautiful," Karen said. "Truly." "The boy I once knew," Wendy continued, her voice growing softer, "he chose to never grow up. And I chose differently. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice. Growing up has been harder than I imagined, loss, responsibility, disappointment. But it's also given me things I never could have had otherwise: love, purpose, the ability to help others. Real friendship. Not just adventure friendship, but the kind that weathers ordinary life." The baker placed a selection of small pastries before her, tiny mince pies, each one perfect, chocolate truffles dusted with gold, candied orange slices dipped in dark chocolate, and something that looked like a star, a pastry made with layers of thin dough filled with cream and winter spices. "In my travels," Scheherazade said, "I've learned that there are two kinds of magic. There's the magic of eternal youth, of never-ending adventure, of flying away from anything difficult. And then there's the magic of growing things, of commitment, of transforming ordinary life into something extraordinary through care and attention. Both are real, but only one leads to wisdom. And only one leads to this," Pip added, gesturing around the bakery, "to moments like these. Strangers gathered in a warm place, sharing food and stories. This is grown-up magic. This is what we gain when we choose to stay and build instead of fly and flee. Wendy's eyes shimmered with tears that didn't quite fall. Thank you. I needed to hear that. Especially tonight. Especially during Christmas, when part of me still listens for the sound of tapping at the window. But now, Gretel said gently, you have the wisdom to know that what's inside this warm room is just as magical as anything outside that window. More so, even. Yes, Wendy agreed. Yes, I think I do. Outside, the snow was falling more heavily now, but the rain had stopped entirely. The storm was transforming into something quieter, gentler, a Christmas snowfall that would blanket the city in white silence. Inside the Rainy Day Storybook Bakery, the 6 visitors and their mysterious host settled into the deepest kind of comfort. The baker moved among them quietly, refilling cups, bringing fresh treats, ensuring the fire was fed and the lights remained soft and golden. No one seemed inclined to leave, and the baker made no move to hurry them. This was the true magic of the place. It existed outside of normal time, outside of rushing and schedules and the demands of ordinary life. Jim pulled out a small harmonica and played a gentle tune, something old and sailing inspired, slow and rhythmic as waves. Scheherazade began to tell a story, not one of her famous tales from the Arabian Nights, but something simpler, a folk tale from a village she'd visited, about a family of mice who lived in a bakery and considered the baker their patron saint. Gretel laughed at all the right moments, adding her own details about the mice she'd discovered in her own bakery's storeroom. Karen curled deeper into her chair, the blanket pulled close, her face peaceful in a way it probably rarely was. Pip shared memories of Christmas dinners past, both the grand ones from his gentleman days and the simpler ones from his youth, and how he'd finally learned that love and plenty were not measured by the elaborateness of the meal. Wendy listened to it all, contributing her own stories when the moment felt right, and gradually the tightness that had been in her shoulders when she entered began to ease away. The fire burned low and was built up again. The snow continued to fall, and the Rainy Day Storybook Bakery held them all in its gentle, steadfast embrace. I think, Karen said at one point, her voice drowsy and content, that this must be what heaven feels like. Just this warmth, safety, good food, good company, nothing more needed. Perhaps heaven isn't a place we go when we die, Scheherazade mused. Perhaps it's moments like these, scattered throughout our lives, reminding us what we're meant to treasure. Islands of warmth in the sea of existence, Jim added softly. Crumbs of grace in our daily bread, Gretel said. They fell silent then, but it was the comfortable silence of people who had found exactly where they needed to be. The baker moved quietly in the background, washing dishes with unhurried movements, occasionally humming a tune too soft to quite make out. As the night deepened toward true late evening, the baker began to bring out special treats, different for each person, not asking, simply knowing. For Gretel, a small loaf of dark rye bread, still warm, wrapped in cloth. For Jim, a tin of ship's biscuits, but elevated, made with butter and honey and love instead of hardtack's usual grim practicality. For Scheherazade, a small box of rose Turkish delight, each piece perfect and jewel-like. For Karen, a bag of the star-shaped cookies, enough to share with the children at the home where she worked. For Pip, a smaller cake to take to his relatives, something to share, to bring people together. And for Wendy, a small wooden box containing what looked like pixie dust but was actually gold-dusted sugar for sprinkling on morning toast, a reminder that magic existed in everyday things. Each person accepted their gift with quiet gratitude, understanding without being told that these were blessings, provisions for the journey, ways of carrying the warmth of this place back out into the world. "We should go," Pip said eventually, though no one moved immediately. "The snow is easing, and I suppose our ordinary lives are waiting for us." "They are," the baker agreed, "but they'll be there when you arrive. No need to rush just yet." So they remained a while longer, finishing the last of their drinks, savoring the final moments of perfect peace. When they finally began to gather their coats and scarves, wrapping themselves back up against the winter night, they moved slowly, reluctantly. At the door, each person paused to thank the baker, some with words, some with gestures, all with genuine warmth. The baker accepted each thanks with a small nod, a gentle smile, and sometimes a brief touch to the shoulder or hand, a blessing, a benediction. Wendy was the last to leave. She stood at the door, looking back at the golden interior of the bakery. "Will this place always be here?" she asked. "When we need it?" "Always," the baker said simply, "for those who need to find it." "Good," Wendy said. "That's very good indeed." She stepped out into the snowy night, joining the others who had gathered on the street outside, all of them marveling at how the city had been transformed, white and clean and peaceful, with the storm completely past. They stood together for a moment, these 6 souls from such different stories, brought together by chance and a warm bakery and a stormy night. "Perhaps we'll meet again," Scheherazade said, "in another bakery, another warm place." "I'd like that," Karen said shyly. "So would I," Jim agreed. They went their separate ways then, into their separate stories, each carrying with them the warmth of the Rainy Day Storybook Bakery in the treats they held, in the full bellies and restored spirits, in the memory of connection and safety and perfect, peaceful comfort. Inside the bakery, the baker extinguished the lights one by one, banked the fire to glowing coals, and wiped down the counters with slow, meditative movements. The cases were already filling with fresh goods for tomorrow, for there would be a tomorrow, and other travelers, other storms, other souls in need of warmth. The baker looked out the window at the snow-covered street, at the lamp-posts glowing like gentle moons, at the occasional lighted window of someone else still awake in the late evening. Somewhere out there, Gretel was walking toward her brother's house, already planning the breads she'd bake tomorrow. Jim was heading to his inn, his heart quiet in a way it rarely was at sea. Scheherazade was penning notes in a small journal, capturing the evening stories before sleep took her. Karen was riding a late tram toward the children's home, imagining the faces of the orphans when she'd share the star cookies with them. Pip was arriving at his relative's door, bearing cake and carrying with him a renewed appreciation for the simple act of gathering together. And Wendy was climbing the stairs to her childhood bedroom in her parents' house, understanding finally that the best adventures were often the quietest ones. The baker smiled, locked the door, and turned off the final light. Outside, the snow continued to fall, soft as a lullaby, blanketing the world in peace. The Rainy Day Storybook Bakery settled into its foundations, warm and content, ready to open its doors again when the next storm came, when the next weary traveler needed shelter, when the next soul required exactly what only a magical bakery on a winter's night could provide. And if you listen very carefully, even now, you can almost hear it, the gentle crackle of the fire, the soft hum of the ovens, the whisper of snowflakes against old windows, and beneath it all, the steady, comforting heartbeat of a place built on warmth, on welcome, on the simple magic of bread and kindness and shelter from the storm. Sleep now, dear traveler. The bakery will be there when you need it. It's always there, just around the corner, just beyond the next turn, waiting with warm lights and open doors, and exactly what you've been seeking. You need only find your way through the storm, and you will. When the time is right, you will. Rest easy now, rest well. The story has ended. The night is gentle, and all, for now, is well.